Chapter 6. Rosa's eyes got wide. She grabbed the stick tightly and followed me towards the source of the noise. Eva took out an item that looked like a syringe. I guess there were tranquilizers in them to put whatever we approached to sleep. Leave it to the adept medic to find a practical use for medical appliances. Hazel ripped a sturdy branch off the nearest tree and made a satisfied grin. "Hey guys," called a soft voice. It was Avia. Today, her wavy brown hair was tied into a ponytail, and the blonde highlights were as bright as usual. She wore a turquoise ruffled camisole. Oh my gosh, I can't talk today. Along with a black leather jacket, and her necklace hung around her neck as usual. Nobody tried to ask her where the necklace came from because she would snap them. "I don't know, okay?" Avia was a year older than me, and I was 13. She was still short and maybe an inch or two shorter. "Hey, Avia," Rose exclaimed, tackling her in a hug. Eva sighed. Avia got up and smiled. "Hey, Rose, what are you guys doing?" "Well, we're going to find the source of weird crash-like noise," Hazel said. "Not without me," came another voice. It was Storm. A 17-year-old girl emerged from the bushes behind me and hugged me. "Oh, hey, Storm," I said. "Want to help us?" She nodded. Her dirty blonde hair was tied up, and her blue and green eyes, yeah, one eye was green, the other was blue. It was kind of unsettling, shimmered mischievously. She wore her normal green armor and quiver full of arrows. "Let's go," she exclaimed. The walk was not so easy. More than half the time we had to push aside branches and avoid poison ivy. Rose got close to touch one, but I pushed her away from it. Avia held onto the pendant of her necklace, which was shaped like a crystal. What shape? I kicked aside a fallen branch that was pretty big and continued trudging along. Luckily, Hazel brought a map with her, so we weren't going to get lost. Eva and I were ahead of the others, but then we heard Storm calling, "Linny! Eva, come back! Avia's got stung by a bee!" Eva and I rushed to see where Storm was. Avia was on the ground, hugging her ankle. Sure enough, there was a needle in her foot. "Don't think about it, Avia," Eva said as she rushed to get Band-Aids and medical ointment. Avia squeezed her eyes shut and clutched her pendant. Eva slowly and carefully pulled out the needle. She applied the ointment to the cut and covered it with a Band-Aid. "Luckily, it wasn't infected," she murmured. Avia nodded and slowly stood up. She shuddered and continued trudging forward. We had at last reached the source, and the source was a house. The spruce cabin looked very new, as if someone had just moved into it. It was in the middle of a clearing, which made sense why it was so hidden. I caught a glimpse of a tall shadow moving across the ground. It was tall, with human-like features, and it was hurrying around, whispering, "Ugh, they're here." It was definitely a boy, and by the sound of him, he wasn't going to turn out the friendliest. Guess what? I was wrong. We crouched behind a bush to hide, and Storm knocked an arrow in her bow. The door suddenly opened, and the most unexpected person came out. His dark brown hair was swept over the side, and his grayish-blue eyes looked worn out. To match with the tired and ghastly look, he wore torn clothes and had ghastly pale skin. He also had bags under his eyes. He glanced around him, then spotted the tip of Storm's arrow and put his hands up in surrender. "I'm not going to attack," he said calmly. Hazel stood up. "Who are you?" She tilted her head. I'm Kevin." He watched us as we slowly approached him. Storm lowered her bow and put her arrow back in her quiver. We introduced ourselves, and Kevin seemed less wary now. He was about to ask us something, but Storm grabbed an arrow and shoved Kevin inside. "What?" Kevin asked, wide-eyed. As Storm knocked the arrow and flung it, we heard the clattering of bones and realized that Storm had saved Kevin from a skeleton. "Good one, Storm," I breathed, looking at Kevin. Then I felt harsh hands grab my shoulders and shove me on the ground. "Ah!" I yelled, stabbing whatever was on me with my dagger. I turned around and realized a zombie had just tried to kill me. I shuddered and stood up. Eva, look out! She kicked aside another zombie. Another zombie snarled behind me, and I whirled around and stuck my dagger into its thigh. It collapsed and disappeared. Hazel and the others, including Kevin, stared at me. Oh gosh, Lenny, look at yourself, Hazel said, pointing to my face. I rushed to the stream nearby Kevin's cabin and glanced at my reflection. I immediately noticed that something was wrong with me. My face was deathly pale with a tint of green, and a part of my hair fell out. Oh gosh, I held back a scream and ran to Eva. I'm turning into a zombie! I think I freaked out because the next thing I heard was a thud. I think it was me, fainting. Lenny, wake up, a voice whispered into my ear. I opened my eyes. I was in Hazel's cabin with the others. Avia smiled. Glad you're awake. Hazel had to use one of her enchanted herbs. Hazel nodded. Kevin asked, what happened? I think that there were zombies on me. I kind of turned part zombie. I sighed and sat up. My hair was back to normal. Don't you know what this means, guys? Zombies and skeletons in the day? It was probably just me, but the room's temperature dropped about 10 degrees. Everyone's face became pale, except Hazel's and Kevin's. Theirs were pale enough. Eva and Rose, who I think was speechless for a while or were doing something because she didn't say much before, said in unison, The apocalypse is nearing. End of chapter 6.